Hello, this is Otaimin. There's a hunter-gatherer tribe in Tanzania called the Hadza. Anthropologists go and do participant observation with them. Normally, the rule is to just observe, not interfere. But because the Hadza were so poor and hungry, the researchers showed them how to set simple traps to catch guinea fowl. Even so, the men insisted on going after big animals like giraffes. On average, a giraffe hunt succeeds maybe once every 3 months. And they don't have fridges or storage facilities, so whenever they got a giraffe, the meat had to be shared by the whole tribe. For the hunter risking his life, it's actually a very inefficient outcome. Meanwhile, guinea fowl could be caught almost weekly, enough to feed a man and his family reliably. So the rational choice obviously would be guinea fowl, yet the Hadza men stubbornly stuck with giraffe hunting. When the anthropologists asked, why not catch guinea fowl, the men got angry. They were offended. That's what the researcher later wrote. Scholars then started debating why this might actually be rational. Lots of theories popped up, and some explanations do make sense. For example, maybe it was about gaining social status, making yourself more attractive to women. Or perhaps hunting itself was a collective, organized activity. And in their society, organized activity among men was also training for intertribal war, so missing out would be seen as dangerous, even shameful. Now, why do I bring this up when we talk about the metaverse today? Because as Wittgenstein might put it, even new phenomena carry universal patterns, and I think we can see the metaverse through those patterns. The German philosopher Hegel coined the phrase struggle for recognition. That's what it means. He argued that this struggle was the engine of history, but Hegel's idea of recognition doesn't line up with the rational economic man of modern social science. Modern theory assumes most human motivation is economic. Hegel said, no, it's deeper. Economic value might even be secondary. What's more fundamental is being recognized. So when I look at the metaverse, I find Hegel's lens of recognition very useful, and it ties back to the Hadza hunters too. It's something worth us reflecting on together. Take lineage. For example, there's the player-created saga of the Bart's Liberation War. In that war, not among the revolutionaries but on the Lord's side, there was a character named Icarus. Icarus was the first player to hit max level in Lineage 2, a legendary figure. He was also a brilliant strategist, feared by the revolutionaries. 10 years later, in 2015, NCSoft even held a 10-year anniversary event for that war, bringing the main players together, giving out plaques, sharing a meal. Now here's what I want to ask you about this Icarus. I don't know what social standing he has in real life, but how do you think he remembers himself? That's the question. He was remembered by tens of thousands, feared by tens of thousands in the Bart's Liberation War. Don't you think he'd remember himself as Icarus, the legend of that war? That's the question I'm throwing out to you. Could he ever look back on his life and leave this story out? Speaking as a man myself, I'd say that'd be almost impossible. Men tend to need a strong, self-centered story. But in reality, most of us aren't satisfied with the story our lives give us. If you're someone like Lee Jae-myung or Yoon Suk-yeol, sure, you get a pretty grand narrative in real life, because you're a factor that directly shapes the lives of millions. But for ordinary folks like us, how many people's lives do we really change? A hero is, by definition, someone who shifts the course of their times. But imagine if everyone were that powerful, it'd be chaos. Only a very select few should have that kind of influence. If everyone and their dog were a variable, life would lose predictability and become unbearable. For the rest of us living ordinary lives, but whether it was Icarus himself or those who fought against him, each one became a variable in the history of lineage. Memories like that weigh heavily on men. That's why the metaverse isn't just virtual reality. Sure, you can call it virtual reality, but it's not a fake reality. Virtual spaces carry very real weight. You can even interpret this through Hegel's idea of the struggle for recognition. So, if you were taught to see everything only through economic rationality, you'll have a hard time grasping the metaverse. Because the metaverse isn't just about putting on VR goggles and playing a lifelike game. It was already here when lineage fever swept through Korea, and even earlier back in the PC network days with games like the Kingdom of the Winds. That's why you can't talk about the metaverse without talking about identity. People place huge value on their identity inside these spaces. In fact, they already do. They'll buy clothes for their avatar to express themselves, or spend money on rare items. Spending money is another way of saying this has value. Value isn't only in the tangible things around us, there's also value in the virtual. And because real world and virtual value are on equal footing, they can interchange, that's the key. That's why, in the early 2000s, people literally gave up real-life obligations for lineage. They sacrificed so much. They gave up time, friendships, even school and careers. And of course, money too. When we think about this as a monetary phenomenon, we bump into what economists criticize as sunk cost. That sunk cost effect is very real here. An item feels valuable because of the huge amount of time you put into it. In the same way, Bitcoin feels valuable because so much electricity has been burned for it. And honestly, that's not wrong. But if you only see it as a sunk cost, you'll say it's meaningless without future value. Technically, that's true too. Like saying, Icarus's armor or sword is valuable only if it holds future value. It's not valuable just because someone worked so hard to get it. And that makes sense too, in a way. But in practice, what we call sunk cost is actually part of how all this works. Anyway, Lineage's 20-year history already showed us that virtual assets can interchange with real-world value. That's one of the big themes of the Metaverse era. So it's no longer the case that the dollars we use in the real world are fundamentally different from Linden dollars in Second Life, Robux in Roblox, or Adena in Lineage. Regulators noticed this 20 years ago and tried to keep the walls up. To stop value from flowing across, they really did try. But Bitcoin and Ethereum have blown right through those walls. That's why it's become seamless. So what do we do with this now? In short, it's a mess and a big one. Which is why we need to treat this as something revolutionary. Because what's happening really is revolutionary. If people don't dismiss virtual worlds as fake and truly see value there, and if ownership inside those worlds is guaranteed, what kind of monetary free-for-all are we facing? That's a serious question. Even I'd call it a mayhem. It's that significant. Either way, a key to reading the Metaverse is the struggle for recognition. So don't look at this only through the lens of Homo economicus. Try another lens. Our human drive for recognition, which is particularly strong instinctively among men. It's like wanting to be that guy, the one who brings down the giraffe. You feel that, right? The Metaverse offers many ways to satisfy that instinct. It can feed our creative drive, our wish to be a hero, our desire for attention, or even to help others. Desires that, for many reasons, get bottled up in real life. In the Metaverse, those possibilities open up wide. So people pour what they value in real life into the Metaverse. They swap it in. They swap in their time, their attention, their money. Now, as long as those items stayed locked inside each platform, it wasn't that disruptive from the perspective of monetary elites. But imagine they can exit the servers, trade freely, and move across platforms. That's when the people running money start to panic, which is why macroeconomists need to jump in fast and study this, instead of folding their arms just because they dislike Bitcoin. Yes, NFTs have bubbles, but they ultimately assert that ownership belongs to the user, not the platform. And that concept is breaking into the real world. So the question isn't whether dollars get used inside Lineage, Second Life, or Roblox. It's that Roblox-made items can serve as a medium to trade for other valuable things, and those values can flow across boundaries. Blockchain is what punched that tunnel through. Say we try to apply the travel rule, but if Bitcoin changes hands via NFT items moving inside the Metaverse, never touching the banking system, how do you apply the travel rule to that? Regulators at least had exchanges people used accounts to buy Bitcoin, which made oversight easier. But if players swap game-mined items for BTC or ETH, then invest that BTC via a decentralized exchange not linked to $1 or dollars, and swap back again, where exactly do you apply the travel rule in that loop? It's operating outside traditional finance from the start, isn't it? So the key ideas of the Metaverse are identity, seamlessness, and hybridization. These are the lenses you need to keep looking through. And with identity, you need to start your reflection from Hegel's old idea of the struggle for recognition. That's all for today. Have a great weekend. Thank you.